Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Mark Ettensohn. Welcome to Heal NPD. So I wanted to address what appears to be a common misunderstanding. I've seen numerous comments on my channel by viewers who are somehow under the impression that pathological narcissism and NPD are not forms of mental illness. Here's a brief sampling. So I found myself correcting these misconceptions often enough that I decided to go ahead and make a video that explains why pathological narcissism and NPD are absolutely forms of mental illness and should be treated as such. There are several ways that we might conceptualize the term mental illness, but I thought it might be simplest to consult the American Psychiatric Association. That's the main professional organization of psychiatrists in the US, and it's also the largest psychiatric organization in the world. The APA publishes the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, and that's the standard classification of mental disorders used by all mental health clinicians in the United States. According to the American Psychiatric Association, mental illness refers collectively to all diagnosable mental disorders. And we find diagnosable mental disorders in the DSM, and that includes personality disorders like NPD. So by definition, NPD is a mental illness because it is a diagnosable mental disorder.
Boom, I still got it.
Now I could stop there, but I also want to discuss the other ways that NPD fits the description of mental illness as provided by the American Psychiatric Association. They go on to say that mental illness is any condition that involves significant changes in thinking, emotion, and/or behavior, and distress and/or problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. Individuals with NPD are subject to periods of unrealistically positive self-esteem, where they may feel they're perfect, flawless, or of near infinite capabilities. These episodes are often accompanied by marked changes in behavior that include temporary extroversion, expansiveness, taking on more responsibilities than the person can reasonably handle, idealizing others or devaluing them, treating others with contempt or disdain, angry or entitled outbursts, substance abuse, and infidelity. Now, individuals with NPD may also experience periods of unrealistically negative self-esteem. According to the DSM-5 TR, that is the most recent edition of the DSM, their self-esteem is almost invariably fragile. They struggle with severe internal self-doubt, self-criticism, and emptiness. That's on page 761. Now, I'm quoting directly from the DSM. Low self-esteem with inferiority, vulnerability, and sustained feelings of shame, envy, and humiliation, accompanied by self-criticism and insecurity, can make individuals with narcissistic personality disorder susceptible to social withdrawal, emptiness, and depressed mood. High perfectionist standards are often associated with significant fear of exposure to imperfection, failure, and overwhelming emotions. That's on page 762. In the context of severe stress, and given the perfectionism often associated with narcissistic personality disorder, exposure to imperfection, failure, and overwhelming emotions can evoke suicidal ideation. That's on page 763. Now, as you can see, NPD involves significant changes in thinking, emotion, and behavior. It also involves distress and/or problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. So not only is NPD a mental illness by definition, because it's a diagnosable mental disorder in the DSM,
Boom, I still got it.
it's also a mental illness because it meets both of the APA's other criteria for mental illness. And really, what else would you call a condition that causes distortions in self-image and self-esteem that are so severe that the person experiences functional impairment across multiple areas of life and that can ultimately lead to suicide? If that isn't an example of mental illness, then I honestly don't know what would be. Okay, so that's NPD. But what about pathological narcissism? Is pathological narcissism also a form of mental illness? Well, the answer is yes, and here's why. Pathological narcissism is the broad term that describes difficulty maintaining a positive, realistic self-image accompanied by deficits in effective coping when threats to self-image are encountered. Now, that definition is lifted directly from the research literature. Pathological narcissism is the umbrella term that describes unhealthy narcissism. That is, when a person is having trouble with their self-image and their self-esteem. Narcissistic personality disorder is one diagnosable instance of pathological narcissism. It's the main one we think of because it's a personality style that's defined by pathological narcissism. But pathological narcissism can show up in many other mental disorders as well. For example, major depression often involves negative distortions in self-image, including feelings of worthlessness, low self-esteem, and problems coping with these issues. We could therefore say that some cases of major depression involve pathological narcissism. We also find pathological narcissism in other personality disorders besides NPD, since many of them also involve distortions in self-image. We sometimes find pathological narcissism in bipolar disorders that feature depressive episodes where the person feels worthless and incapable, or manic episodes where the person's self-image is distorted in a positive direction and they experience periods of grandiosity. And we also find pathological narcissism in psychotic disorders, where the individual sometimes experiences delusions of grandeur, where they may feel that they're the most important person alive or that they're literally a god on earth. While pathological narcissism is not itself a diagnosable disorder, it still meets the other two criteria for mental illness established by the American Psychiatric Association. As such, pathological narcissism is very much a form of mental illness.
Boom.
So I hope that clears up any confusion out there about this issue. As always, please leave questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos below. And until next time, take good care.